Hi, everybody. This is Martha Creek. This is the third session of our Cracking the Healer's Code. The first session is recorded and is available on my website coming up soon, and then currently on the Spiritual Life Center of Troy, Michigan. And you're welcome to use them, share them any way in the world you can do. Anything you can do with them, use them, teach from them, whatever, do it. That's what they're for. And at any time you want to share on this class and not be recorded, simply ask for that, to have the recording stopped. And you're absolutely honored. I'm honored to do that and to honor you in that way, and not to let it stop you from sharing, saying what you need to say, what you want to say, or bringing a conversation, a topic in, a discussion point, or whatever it is. Hi, Joy. Glad you're here. So anything you want to start off with from the conversations last week with our author, Milagros, anything you may have learned, anything from the book, anything on the top of your mind? So find ways to keep learning. I was just sharing with Bill before some of y'all came on. Bill is on Facebook as Bill Madison, and he's made some posts about African-American history, and particularly today, Black men in the service and how they were treated, and the extraordinary skill that they had, and even were the first Top Guns and wasn't honored as the Top Guns, and included even when they were announced as being in that position, they weren't acknowledged or given a round of applause or anything else, and that was set aside, so to speak, and not spoken about. Was it, Bill, like 55 years or something? And so continue to learn. I learned from a realtor friend that it's aggressive or aggression, racial aggression, to call a bedroom a master bedroom. Now, I would have had no knowledge about this, and it makes perfect sense. So the term is main bedroom, the new term. So I can't unknow that now. And as much as I would never have used that intentionally to harm, then there's harm. And it keeps a conditioning in place that we're sincerely and wholeheartedly here in this class doing our best to recondition. So any of you that have learned something specific or want to share it here, that's kind of the overarching thing for this class for me, was to learn what I don't know, and absolutely clear that I don't know what I don't know. Learn, and expand my love to myself for what I didn't know, and to others, and how they have been mistreated violently, consistently for hundreds of years. And then decide how I'm going to be with this and what I can do about it from here, and then do differently. So learn, love, decide, do. That's also the theme of our Anton Conference, which is affiliated New Thought Network, and it's out in Unity Village, September 26th, Monday through Friday. And Milagros is going to be out there as a keynote speaker. And so is this beautiful man named Bio, and he's Nigerian living in India. And I'm going to put a link to the interviews and a link to their websites and all that here in the chat in a minute when everybody gets on here, when the majority get on here. So and I'd love to see you. I'd love to hang out with you a week or a few days, whatever you can afford, if you can get out there. All right. So let's think about then how. So this is for your reflection and contemplation, and I'd love to hear your answers. And you might just take a minute and write something down if it'll help you to process it. How do you make sense out of the injustices, racial injustices, based on our historical conditioning? How do you make sense of these injustices? And without trying to give a right answer, it's like a sincere answer. How can you make sense out of the injustices? And if you want to share, just wave like this. If you want to put it in the chat, you're free to. Sigrid?
Hi, Martha. I was going to say this before you even posed the question, but this fits right in with your question. I'm in the early stages of the book. I'm about, pardon me, I'm reading it on Kindle. I'm about 25% of the way through. And I just reached this part about people from warm climates versus those in cold climates. And it, like you with the master bedroom, it blew me away because I never thought about enslavement from the perspective of abundance versus scarcity. And I just find that so interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I had a similar response when I interviewed her first and she spoke axiology.
Yeah.
I had to look it up. I had never heard the term. It was completely unfamiliar about it. And I hesitated to interrupt her last week. And I still have that on my mind because it's still confusing to me a bit because I can see both in my own family, for example. My mother had put out a garden enough to feed a community.
Wow.
And then we cooked it, canned it, froze it, and then left out bushel baskets of it for people to pick up on a daily basis.
So nice.
And she stored 3 deep freezers and a cellar full.
Holy smoke. Yeah.
So she was in this bounty. There's such bounty.
Yeah.
Give it away.
Yeah.
Away. She was so in this save it, save it, save it. We're going to need it. We've got to prepare for the winter. Got to feed our own. I just with my mother. Hi, Brenna. Hi, Angel. Hi, Sarah. I had a feeling with my mother that she was feeding a family way beyond our family.
It sounds like there's all this love and generosity there and the thought about all the others aside from your family's taken care of. And so she can think of the others. But the enslavement mentality is thinking more fear and me, and who cares about you? Who cares Absolutely. About you? And you take care of yourself, I take care of myself.
Even Bill
but
said,
me first.
Before some of you came on the line, it's like even inhuman.
Yeah.
You know, like we can't see humans as humans. Like they're so less than or so less deserving or so incapable or God knows what. So that concept really struck me too. And it's still something I look at as I watch people. And we even in this new thought, we'll say the have and the have nots. We'll say you're generous, they're so generous. We'll say there's takers and givers.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is some of the cousins of that, of like, who's in line to say, I can't do it. Give me, feed me, feed me, feed me. And somebody else in line saying, oh yeah, I'll do that. Being kind of over responsible. And whatever's informing us about that, including our latitude.
Yeah.
Others, how any other thing on your mind, honey? Ron, go ahead.
I find myself always moving between my personality self or ego self and my higher self, that divine mind self that lives within me. And whenever I look at racial discrimination or any kind of negative behavior, I see it always as people living out of that lower self, that ego-driven self that is not connected to the higher way. And if we move toward that higher way, we move toward a love dynamic that is in harmony with the universe, in harmony with one another.
And the group says amen. Deborah, go ahead, honey. Mm-hmm.
I think so much of it has to do with people not knowing or associating with another kind of person, another race, another, ethnicity, even another, like rich versus poor, or haves and have-nots. It's not knowing somebody. And if you grew up not having any association with Black people or brown people, you have this maybe uneasy feeling because they're not like you think. And so much of it, I think, is upbringing. I mean, I look at it as it's racist, and it's also prejudice, because I know myself, I had prejudice against white Southern men. And I grew up in New York, Northerner, and even a Southern accent, I had a prejudice against. And I know, when Bill and I got married, or even dating, there were people on both sides, because they didn't know each of us, and they ended up saying, oh, well, Deb is different or Bill is different. And the only difference in that is that they got to know each of us.
Yeah.
So I think that is so important.
I think so too, Deb. And I've said many times, like, they fell in love with them before they realized they were different. So the love led in some cases, and particularly in my family. And we only had one Black family in my school, which was a small school of 60 people in Southern Kentucky. And I love those people, every bit of them, their mama, their daddy, all the kids. And we were just fine, doing fine. And then one day there started to be this rumbling about the family. And I was struck by it. And it's because one of the men, the oldest of the boys, which was a few years older than me, the oldest of the boys started dating a white girl. And that's when hell broke loose. Because everything's fine till then. And as a kid, I was so disturbed about it because of how much violence, even in their language. Nobody hurt him physically hurt him, as far as I know. They went on and dated, they ended up married. But the violence, the language violence against him, and the hate in the language about him. And I'm like, how can you love him one minute and then spew this hate at him the next? I could not comprehend it because of this dating. And I remember then, like something like, I don't know, Phil McGraw would probably call it a defining moment of like, this is how quick this can go. This is how quick this violence can erupt, and this violence can be. And some of the comments were, he's dating so-and-so's girl. Like, today, I feel like I could vomit even saying it. He's dating so-and-so's girl, like that girl was his possession. Like, we got to step in and like take care of that man's girl. Like, that girl is his possession. So there was that element of it too, and the prejudice of that. So it looking back on it, I feel grateful that my heart didn't close off to it. I feel grateful that I didn't get whatever gene, if it's a genetic thing or the conditioning, that I had enough self, even as a kid, to say that I can't, that's not true for me. That's not true for me. And I also was aware that was my indicator that I set aside right then, as much as I love dark-skinned, brown-skinned, black-skinned people, that it would not be okay for me to date them because they wouldn't be safe in my family. And that it would be like I was doing something against them. So something formed in that young mind to say that it's off limits to me, even if my heart is open to it, it's off limits because it would be too risky for another human being. So defining moments, maybe some of you have had your own. And if you want to share them or speak about them, you're welcome to here. Tiffany.
Thanks, Martha. I just, as I've been reading this book, I've been thankful that in my lifetime, at least, I can look back and see that there were efforts made to educate me. And I remember just like my second year of college, I think it was January 1990, like the first year that the Martin Luther King holiday was recognized. The college I attended canceled classes and said, we're going to do a day of learning one day. And I just remember at that day of learning, I learned a lesson on affirmative action that has stayed with me for my life. But the personal area that I have been trying to work on and heal in my life had to do with something I learned in 2012, I think it was. It was my first year of seminary when I went back to school, and I took a J-term course that was considered a cross-cultural, like a global immersion course, and it was to stay for 3 weeks in Detroit, Michigan. And I actually am from the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. So we went, 12 or 13 of us seminary students and some professors, and we stayed in a house in the inner city of Detroit. And we learned about food justice, about the fact that if you were living there and you were dependent on public transportation, you literally could not get to a store that sold food. A majority of the stores sold liquor and lottery tickets. And, we committed to doing our shopping there, and we found rotten produce and things on the shelves that were expired. And it was really sad. But the connection I made with Milagros' book is I'm getting into her section on the banking industry and housing. And we learned very specifically in that class how the practice of redlining, of valuing houses based on the racial makeup of the neighborhood, specifically impacted neighborhoods in Detroit where my family had lived and moved from. So it was just a very convicting experience for me personally, and it was accompanied with a scripture lesson from the New Testament on the Beatitudes, the version that talks about both the blessings and the curses. And I just have been really wrestling with the truth that I understand about my life and my family, how we benefited, our property, our families, wealth, whatever, was a direct result of this racist practice that, now when I see where I am in my lifetime and what the rest of Detroit looked like when I was there, and you could see how just the wealth and everything had been divested of those communities and the property. And so for me to carry around this knowledge in a real personal way, I think about it a lot. I've preached about it once or twice. But I guess personally, I just try to be more aware for how deeply that has affected me and my family and our connection to the city of Detroit now. And I try to go there more and just see it and be a part of it when I can. And, I don't know what steps to take other than to keep opening my mind to it and being aware of it.
Well, something will come to you, honey. And may have already, to in some way do what we can to balance it, or to make up for what we didn't know, or to speak about it, or to educate, or something. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
For your own reflection. How do you make sense of this? How are we to make sense of this? Brenna?
I'm Brenna. Apologies that I haven't been here yet. I've been with family, and thank you for having me join. I have been thinking a lot about healing and re-healing and re-healing, and how that comes in waves. When I was with my family last week, I brought my girlfriend home for the first time, and they're Indigenous, and my whole family is white. And I was really excited for this opportunity, because this is like the good the not racist family. This is the, we care about Black Lives Matter. We understand gender identities and things like that family. And I was like, this is the opportunity that I can mesh these two worlds that I have in an actually safe way. And Martha, kind of your what you brought up really hit home for me, because I did not calibrate. My expectations are very different from my girlfriend's, and while it was okay, it was not. It could have been much worse. There were things like sage on the table as an offering, where my girlfriend was like, this is really culturally inappropriate and insensitive and appropriative. When things like that happen, I tend to go into bare minimum an internal rage and want to fix immediately. That is not always what my girlfriend wants, and I have to reassess and be okay with the fact that I am to do nothing at this time, because that's what's asked of me, even though that is really painful for me. I want to advocate, and that's not what's needed in the moment. What's needed in the moment is, how do we get through this safely for the rest of the weekend? Like, how do we not cause, more pain for the rest of the weekend? And so I've started thinking about healing in different ways, not just healing from like past experiences that I've had or that people I've known have had, but also like wounds that keep opening up and shifting and evolving. And it's like a never-ending experience that I'm continually going to live moving forward.
Thank you, Brenna. Thank you for sharing your life with us, honey, and the real walk. And, as I hear it, I relate, honey, to your girlfriend. I also relate to your family. And I can see me in both. I can see me plopping some sage out, wanting to do something kind and loving and appropriate, and without a speck of realization of just how not appropriate it is. I can relate to all sides of it. And I watched some little movie without even knowing anything about it. I think I just took whatever it recommended, and it was called Wedding Season. And it was some Asian Indian family trying to marry their daughter off and doing it according to their traditions, and she was having nothing of it. And one daughter had already picked somebody that wasn't Indian, and somehow they had navigated, and she was about to marry him. And he showed up at the house dressed in Indian wear, and put a turban on, and maybe put a dot on, and God only knows what else. And they kept just shaking their head like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And eventually he just couldn't stop himself. He's tried to speak the language and he would get it messed up. And it was heartening to me because they never didn't love him. Even with his, I mean, he could try to say something, you know, in Hindi or something, and it would come out as, you know, your cat's on my face or something. Just trying to say, I love you, or what's for dinner or something. It would just come out ridiculous. And the family would kind of roll their eyes, but they never stopped loving him. And I thought, let me be them. Let me be them. As inappropriate as something is, as long as it's not getting worse, then let me just see what can I do to minimize what may go on in my house this week. As long as they're making some effort, I gotta grow myself up enough to hang in there with it some. So big hard hug to you, honey, and what you're navigating. Anybody else? Marcy.
When you spoke about defining moments, I can remember where I grew up in New Jersey. There were no Black folks in our town. They all lived in another town. And when I was in high school, they came to our high school on a bus. But when I was small, I never even saw any Black people. So there was a guy, an old Black man, walking down the street in front of our house. And my mother looked out the window and wondered out loud what he was doing there. And I knew from the way my mother acts that she meant that sincerely. She thought he was lost. So I assumed that all of the other mothers on the street were looking out the window saying, what is that man doing here? But my mother went out and spoke to him and then brought him into the kitchen and got him a glass of iced tea and started looking up in the phone book where it was the address he was looking for and trying to help him find his way, and ended up having to tell him that this, whatever address he was looking for, someone had fooled him. That address didn't exist. And so he thanked her very much for the iced tea and off he went. But that made an impression on me that my mother was not a person to turn someone away or think anything negative about someone because of the color of their skin. And it stayed with me and it helped me all my life. So I was glad for her.
I am too.
Yeah.
So healing is what was the most attractive to this particular book for me, the word healing. And just based on a commitment to my own heart, the healing of my heart, believing that if this heart heals, then it's healed some part of the heart of humanity. So that word is meaningful to me, Marcy, as you speak it. It's meaningful to me from the text and the title of that. And the other question that I kind of put down for us to ponder tonight and is this, which is how will you go about healing from these patterns? How have you and how will you go about healing from these patterned responses, this conditioning, including our genetics, epigenetics, whatever is, my coach would say, that's in our bones and blood that we don't even know is in our bones and blood, and including the prejudice. So how will you go about healing that? What have you done that's been helpful, beneficial? What might you do? Anybody? Deborah?
What I'm trying to do, because we have 6 grandchildren that are biracial, I'm trying to help them deal with what they have been experiencing, especially our oldest, our grandson. And I don't know how to do it. Personally, I don't feel like I need healing. I have been the subject of the same, guilty by association. At 17 years old, I was put in jail with a boyfriend because there was some obscure law on the books sitting more than 10 feet from a street lamp. We were in the front seat of the car. I was denied housing, and all of this by association. So I guess I probably do have some healing to do, because I have a bias on the other end of it. And I see, my grandson walking down the street, Midtown Sacramento, a city of 1 million people at 17 years old. And a cop pulls up, stops him, and he's given the line, "You look like somebody that we're looking for." And he put his hands up. He said, "I'm good." He said, "Nothing going on here." Cop asked for his ID, and he just continued on. But I did not find out about this until about 3 weeks ago. Now, this kid, my grandson, is 27, so this happened 10 years ago. And what hurt so badly is when he said it, and it just came up in conversation. He said, "Grandma," he said, "all I tried to do was to be white." And I don't know how to even give them hope that it can be different. I do know that their friends are multi-racial, they're white, they're Black, and they don't see any difference. Now, of course, we're in Sacramento, California. It's different, maybe because it's California, although certain parts are not this way. So I have a big question about how I can pass on some kind of healing methods or practices to these kids. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And it's a question. I know it's not helping, because you're asking how are we?
Well, it's helpful, I think, honey. And like you, we probably don't have many answers yet, but we're here open, and we're here to learn, and maybe to get an idea or two. And as I listened, I thought, well, tell them this. Maybe this will be some hope. I had Hadeline at about 3 years old in a store, and she wanted a black baby doll. I was thrilled. I mean, thrilled. And she got her black baby doll, and off we went. And when my family saw it, they said, "Who bought her this black baby doll?" And I said, "I did." And I said, "You know what's better than I bought it for her? She picked it. This was her selection of all the baby dolls there. This was hers." And I'm going to ask you not to influence the love that she has for this baby doll. So whatever you've got to do to live out your beliefs and to live out your convictions, please don't put them off on her, if you can stop it. So I don't know if it could create hope, honey, but it was a moment in my life that up until that moment, and maybe if it hadn't have been Hadlin, I don't know if I would have had enough self to take a stance or not either. But that day I did. A little one that may have been a defining moment for her too. Who knows? To be determined. Joy.
Love that story. Thanks. And I apologize. I was having a computer issues. I had to get on my dinosaur computer to get on. So I may have missed a little bit, but I just wanted to comment about the epigenetics part because I was reading that in the last few days. And I've done some similar trauma work, not around race at all, but trauma work in some of my life coaching and some other personal work. But I just absolutely love the way she has framed this with regards to race, and just comes right out and says, that whenever other people are traumatized, like Black people are traumatized, the perpetrator is traumatized as well, or she says compromised in this sentence, right? And so collectively, like how you said, it's in our blood and in our bones, and the research that shows it goes, generational, just like we've always been taught in the Bible, right? But there's evidence of that now. And I am very curious about the healing piece as well, right? The healing of something you don't even know, maybe why you feel that way, or what triggered, like me, what may have triggered me, and how to actually do healing. The things that I have been doing are, some group work, some, reading and facilitating, just getting educated. But the piece that I haven't done is the personal healing work, which is why I'm very excited about the rest of this book. And I'm not that far along, but to just know and be aware that I have healing to do because I'm immersed in the system. I already know every time I take one of those bias tests, I'm moderate to more than that bias, and it's embarrassing, right? I'm embarrassed, but I realize the roots that I came from, which were just grounded in not in some covert racism, right? Nothing was ever explicit, but it was all just implied. And I'm excited about the healing and committed to it, right? So one of the things I'm doing a project with is I'm working with the Sentencing Project, which is just, it's working on like closing prisons and getting rights for those who are incarcerated, and just working on the whole justice around incarceration. And so I feel like that's at least a step of something I can physically do that is helping this problem that seems, like you maybe said, Martha, in our lifetime, I don't know how much, we'll make some progress, hopefully, but we're certainly not going to see the end of it. But I'm committed to doing what I can.
Thank you, Joy. It's clear, honey. Yeah. Me too, honey. And along that lines, I had an opportunity to support a particular attorney who had a heart for helping minority families that had been split up from their children. and for no real crime, actually, no real crime, and providing some resources through her to get to them. That was like, I called it like my little get the families back together before Thanksgiving project. And what it would take, because they didn't have the money to have an attorney or to have a court cost or whatever. And then they're just stuck in the system without having any real crime against them and not having enough resources to do it. So do what you can. Do what you can. Everybody do what you can. Ron, go ahead.
I live in a senior living facility, a large one, where there are so many people that if the Black population were proportional, there would probably be 150 African American people living here. In fact, there are probably a couple of dozen. So I'm serving on the diversity inclusion team here, but on a personal level, I've made a commitment that whenever I encounter someone who is a person of color, if I'm just sitting out on the patio and the person is walking by, I'll say, "Hi, how are you doing? Good to see you." Something like that. And if I'm in a different situation, like at the fitness center or someone, and if a person of color comes in, I will try to engage them in a conversation, get to know them, make a connection. If it seems appropriate, try to take it further. Would you like to share a meal sometime or something like that? But if I'm on the lookout for opportunities, the opportunities seem to come one way or the other.
Yeah, they're there. Thank you, Ron. Yeah.
Martha, I want to say something, that it's amazing that on an individual basis, we are all trying to reach out and make changes in our interactions. And I believe the healing, the big healing that will affect all, has to do with policy and what we vote on, because so much of this, the biggest portion of this, is systemic. It's things that we cannot change on an individual basis, like the prison system, the fact that the supermarkets that don't have food, all of the things that keep people feeling down and not worthy, and everything that goes with that. So I think educating ourselves on laws, policy, and what we're voting for is so important in making those changes in the system, because the system was set up this way and it worked. It totally worked. Not in the favor of African Americans. And what you'll find is that so many things that affect African Americans and poverty also affect white people. I listened to Reverend William Barber, and he's got this whole movement for the Poor People's Movement or something, that I think he's out of North Carolina or South Carolina. And it includes all. So I think that's key too, is, read, educate yourself on policy and laws and the way things are set up. Thanks.
Thank you too, honey. And take action, whatever that is, including see what the people you're electing think and feel and what they are known for, and do your best to get people in place that you think is going to be part of reconditioning, not keeping this archaic system in place. Yeah, secret. Thank you, Deb.
Hi again, Martha, everybody else. I have to leave a little early tonight, so I wanted to say this, and then I'm going to go. And I thank all of you so much for these incredible insights and also vulnerability. Many people here have spoken about personal experiences that they might not share in an otherwise kind of safe environment. What I wanted to say was that I'm trying to take a more optimistic view of this by looking at history. When I look back 50 years ago or 100 years ago, but let's just take 50, pardon me, homophobia and racism and women's rights, the awareness around that was so minimal. When I was growing up, when I was a teenager, there was the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And, it was scandalous, this interracial dating and whatnot. And now I find a great many people in my circle, and I'm not talking about the whole country or the hemisphere or the world. I'm just talking about people I interact with have an incredible awareness of all the isms, classism, and on and on and on and on. And I think over time, with this regular awareness and self questioning, and the way I don't know, you're just listed here, Spiritual Life Center, Ron or Don?
Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Ron, yes, the way you said, like, you'll make that effort, you'll make that take that action, and it might be to ask somebody for a cup of coffee, or to enter into your life in some way, or to think differently about whatever it is. This book is fascinating, and it exposes a lot of ugliness in the world. But I don't think, and it's not meant to, but I don't think there's enough emphasis on the way we have shifted over the last 40, 50 years, really extremely so, in terms of the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, and people with their pronouns listed under their Zoom names and whatnot. I do see that we are changing. I think that we are much more multicultural and more integrated and whatnot. And that doesn't mean that I'm denying the history or minimizing it, but I do have an optimistic view that as we move forward in time, and with younger generations, I don't know what they call them now. Is it X or Z, or I don't know what the youngest gen is called, but I think they're growing up in a very different era where these things will be less rigid for them. They are not going to have the same degree of, let's just start with racism, but all the isms as we who are older have. That's my hope. It's my hope.
Thank you, Sigrid. Thank you. And thank you for being here. And I ditto it, because I have to hang on to that thread of hope myself.
Yeah.
And I pray and pray and pray that this will be the last generation for all of this, that they'll look back on this time and go, what in the world do you mean that you would have a possession, a person as a possession? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean you couldn't marry who you loved? What do you mean? Like, that would be so barbaric. So the thoughts of it would be so barbaric that a human being could no longer do it. So
exactly.
Hang on to your hope, and we'll fan the flames of it here, and not a empty one, that we're not doing something toward moving the needle to the degree that we can. And one of the things that I wrote down for my notes, bye honey, see you next week, was something that she wrote is as far as what to do, because one of the things I came away from is learn something, share what you've learned, and then do something. And that was the call I put out to y'all in the first week. Learn something, share something, do something. And one of the things, like when we don't know what to do, included being compassionate and remembering that we don't know what we don't know either. And like Brenna's family, for example, don't know what they don't know. Like they learned that night that that's inappropriate. And maybe at least they were informed that it was inappropriate, for example. So stay compassionate, because not to stay compassionate is creating something else to heal, some another level of this madness of this. And then for me to be patient, and the biggest one is not to be silent, or not to be as silent as I have been, to do my best where I can to make a difference. And the key is that to know at times, and Milagro says it repeatedly, all we can do is plant seeds. Plant seeds. Plant seeds. And insist on facts. Just what are the facts of the matter? And I remember having a little more backbone about this a few years ago. And I say I regret, I kind of took my backbone out in the name of peace. And it wasn't peaceful. And this so-called comfort zone wasn't one. And I was bringing my friends home. I used to traipse people into bug tussle because they wanted to see bug tussle and see what it was all about and all that, and to go home to family and have mama's gravy and biscuits and all this stuff. So here we went. And I got to thinking about this, that my friend was coming in to bug tussle with me, and she happens to be Jewish. So I asked my brother, be sure not to use the phrase, I Jewed somebody down. And he said, why? And it's like he was completely clueless that it was racist. And it had been handed down to him probably for 7 generations too. So he understood it. Like, he would never hurt one of my friends by making a crack like that. And he absolutely would have said it without even realizing what he was saying. And then I brought my friend Calvin home once, and he's a Black man. And we walked into this restaurant where my mother worked. And boy, it's like when Martha's coming to town, you know, everybody's excited. And here comes Martha and her little congregation. And we walked in that restaurant, and everybody in it went silent. And it was this, and it wasn't a silence like, oh, Martha's here. It's a silence with, who the hell is that? Who the hell is that? And I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely clueless the prejudice that existed. And I wouldn't have brought my friend in there had I have known that. And we went on about our business and had our fun and whatever. And then I eventually brought it up to some of the elders. And they said, do you want to pull the history on the county that you were in? And I said, I do. And it hadn't been that many years ago till they were still lynching Black people on the public square in that very town that I knew nothing about. Now, I know about lynchings. I don't really know about lynchings. And just what a short time ago that was. And just how close to home that was. So, learning, extending love, deciding, doing something different. So, encourage you again, and me as I speak it, to be sure to take really good care of yourself through this. We're encouraged to find the healing nature of contemplation. I can tell you from my own direct experience, it's been helpful to me. Reflection and contemplation, and extending compassion to myself. And to the degree that I can do that, I'll be more apt to do it with you and with other people. So maybe what the master teachers have told us is true. When in doubt, extend compassion and be sure to include self. And I put in the chat a lot of information. I failed to put it in last week, although I said I would. So it's here tonight and recorded. That includes a direct request from Milagros, the author, to please go to Amazon and review the book. If you've read the book or excerpts of the book, any part of the book, to go ahead and put a review on there, which will really uplift that. I gave links to both TED Talks, her original TED Talk, and then a second one, and then the interview that I did with her. And then she asked for me to make known to thank you all for being here last week. You can see that's her own writing. She says it was great fun to be with y'all, to be with us, and to please share the Inc.com column, which is called "It Takes Courage to Start a Company and Takes Even More If You're Black." So all of that's in the chat. So copy that off if you can. And if you don't know how, tell me and I'll get it to you. Thank you all for being here, for witnessing and extending compassion. Anything you want to speak or ask for, any support, anything before we close tonight? Thank you, Brenna. Marcia?
I just want to thank you and Milagros and all of you here. It has been such an eye-opening process, ongoing process for me, living in the Deep South. I'm going through the whole process that she talks about, the anger, the grief, the denial, the depression. And I'm so thankful that you have brought this to us in this book and her work and her expertise. I too am hopeful that each one of us is a lighthouse and there can be no more darkness when we shine, period.
Thank you, honey. Anybody else? You're welcome for my part. You're so welcome for any part I have of it. Thank you for the contributions you've sent. I've got them marked and identified so that I can send them off and share them with Milagros also. So I'll do that at the end of the sessions. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Martha. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, John. Good night. Big hug to you all.
Hugs to you.
Martha, did you say that these were recorded the previous weeks?
The first one was recorded, and then